Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
So it's been a very trying time for so many people, but I can always count on Joe Karp. He's always there, ready, like Freddie. He's just so excited to be on the radio show. He does wonderful seminars. He writes great columns, and he's got a lot to say today. So I want to introduce one of my most favorite guests and friends, Joe Karp, the elder law attorney. Hello, Joe.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Oh, great. And, you know, this is quite a time, isn't it? So tell us, how's it going for you?
Well, it's for me so far. Life has always been good, and I'm always the optimist, and things have been going well. I'm gonna be on vacation, so although we have seminars coming up this week, I won't be doing them. And Jenny Bernstein of my office, who's board-certified elder law attorney, who's been with me 14 years, she'll be doing them in Boynton Beach and Palm Beach Gardens. So that's good for me, so I don't have to be at work while the shop keeps running and people can go do the workshops. And Jenny has been doing my seminars and workshops probably for the last 7 or 8 years. She always does them in St. Lucie, and intermittently she does it in the other offices. But since we took September off from seminars, I always keep September off because I anticipate two things. The Jewish holidays, which always leads to a decline of people being available to show up and see and hear, and hurricanes, and as we well know, we had them this past month, so that I just figure it's safer to put it off till October. So as I warned everybody in August, come in August or wait till October, and in October they'll have Jenny on Wednesday, October 11th in Boynton Beach at the Courtyard by Marriott, starting at 1:30, and Thursday in Palm Beach Gardens at the Palm Beach Marriott at 1:30. And for those of you who've seen me do the workshop, see Jenny.
Yeah.
Listen to her. It's a different approach. The information is pretty much the same, but the messenger is different, and
Sure.
the messenger's younger and better looking too.
Well, depends if you're a man or a woman, you know.
I understand.
Okay. So let's, we talked about the seminars now, and that's great, but let's talk about recent events. We usually don't do that. We like to keep our shows pretty generic, but I think it's important, and I think you have a lot of messages to tell.
Well, the recent event I will talk about, and we'll stay away from the things we shouldn't talk about, is what I've discovered and what I knew, but what was reaffirmed as a result of our hurricane experience. Number one, we were very fortunate in terms of this county that we were not devastated. We were merely significantly inconvenienced. But we were very fortunate that we really didn't get the brunt of the storm. But a lot of people did suffer the brunt of the storm in this county in a different way, and in other portions of the state they suffered it significantly. So we should talk about preparation. People should be prepared. They should, if you will, have their getaway packets. Put your legal documents in plastic, get them ready to go. In fact, if we go back, this is an interesting story. One of my clients who lived in Long Island in the summer and Floridians full-time used to keep their documents wherever they went. And as a result of Hurricane Sandy, all of their documents got soaked and became illegible and were no longer any good. You couldn't read them. So they called me up and said, Joe, we've got the problem. We need to redo our documents. This is a Hurricane Sandy story, but it was for Floridians. And I said, okay, contact your homeowner's insurance and tell them you want to know whether they're going to pay for a claim to damage to your legal documents so I can do it and we can bill them. Let's deal with them up front. And sure enough, they did cover the restoration of all of the documents. We redid all of their documents for them, and they were able to file an insurance claim and get it fixed at the expense of their insurance because it was water damage as a result of Sandy. So always remember that you should be checking on this stuff. That doesn't mean let your papers float away, but that's just a piece of advice that some people neglect to recognize, that those are things of value that are damaged in a storm.
Okay, but now I think... Go ahead. I just wanted to just ask you, though, if you've had people who've been, at least your clients, you notice a lot of stress. I mean, is your wife in stress? Are we all under stress?
Yeah, I can tell you that here's a couple of things that have occurred. One, the stress really does get to people, and the people who are shuttered in and lose power really go through a lot more stress. I've had 2 clients who were living alone in their own homes, shuttered in, who were found dead after the hurricane.
Really?
Yep. One of them, the niece had called up and she said she was going to be coming down and she was going to take her aunt back to Tennessee. And her aunt said, "No, don't be ridiculous. I'll be okay. I'm nervous. I have some anxiety, but I'll be okay." Then she, of course, lost telephonic communication with her aunt and attributed it all to the power failures, the cell failures, etc. And ultimately had to call the local police when there was no answer, and the police went in, broke down the door because they had to get through the shutters, and found that the aunt had died in the place. And she believes it's as a result of the stress, the anxiety, because the electric had kicked back in. You know, there was enough water. There were things, where she wasn't like the unfortunate people in the Hollywood nursing home. She wasn't in no water, no air conditioning, nothing. She was in a safe enough environment, but the stress got there. She was alone, and she died, and she was found probably 10 days after she died. I mean, they put the date of death based upon when the police got there and they broke through, but she had clearly, the place unfortunately smelled like a crime scene there where somebody had died days before. I had another client who I also received a call, and the family came in with a similar situation. The aunt, this was another one who was an aunt. Again, a lot of this has to do with people who are alone during these storms. Her aunt had called her and said she was fine and she would be okay. She had met with Jenny Bernstein in our St. Lucie office, the aunt, about 3 weeks before the hurricane, and she had some decisions to make. She had never done a will. She was a single woman, had never done a will. She was young enough that she was like 70 or 71 or 2. She was young enough that death did not appear imminent, and she said, "I got to think about it. I'll see you." She had made an appointment that she canceled when the storm was coming, and she canceled that when she saw the storm was coming. She canceled that given appointment, and we expected that, we would recall her when we opened. She didn't answer the phone, but, we figured phones are down, they're with family, they're around. And then we got a call from her niece who lived in Lakeland and said, "I just went down to my aunt's house. They found her dead in her house alone." She was sitting at her table with her head rested on the table, and it appears she had a massive coronary. And I find that these types of situations, under these stressful types of conditions, are real and anticipatable. So one of the things I tell you is if you have loved ones who are alone, even when they say they're not scared, they have every reason to be scared, and they're more scared when things are out of the norm, when they have no power, when they have no communication. We ended up in our house, besides our immediate family, we had 4 people, 2 cats, and a semi-paralyzed dog, and I'm not kidding, living with us because we had a more secure environment. We had a generator not to cover AC, but to cover some lights and refrigeration, and these people were not alone. And we set up, we gave up a room to the cats because my wife, even though we have a cat, that cat has its own room because it's a stray that my wife took in. Debbie's allergic to cats. So we had to give up a room for the cats because the person who lived alone with 2 cats wouldn't have come. And we really were afraid. It's a loved one. It's a relative. We were afraid that he would be very nervous, and he might have a coronary alone if the lights were out and the windows are blowing back and forth and things like that. So I think one has to recognize that people under these circumstances run into a lot of problems, and that we have to open up our homes and hearts as best as we can, not leave people alone. The other thing I can tell you is that historically, and I haven't gotten the calls yet this time, but we did during prior hurricanes, my clients with early Alzheimer's, they had the switch triggered. Their behavior changed. They were disoriented, and they started to act out. And that's not uncommon for Alzheimer's patients. Need stability. They need known quantities. And when they're in an environment that's different, it changes. That's why sometimes when people talk to me about their loved one, they say, I'm thinking I'll bring him home and do this after rehab. I don't think he'll make it, or I want to move him from one facility to another. I say, you really have to have a stabilizing influence on the person with Alzheimer's disease. The changes really shake them and impact them negatively. And that negative is not just emotional. It has physiological impact. And so I know I'm going to find out that some of my clients are now in nursing homes or home. And people should just prepare for it. And the other warning is really be prepared. People always say to me, when do I have to do my estate plan? When should I re-up it? And they always, it's not something people like to do. They're dealing with their mortality. They're dealing with family issues that they want to avoid. They're dealing with having to pay a lawyer for something that they're not going to need. It's only going to be in their perception for the people that get it when they're dead. They have all of the reasons in the world that they want to procrastinate. But they really shouldn't. I know that the one person who came in from Tennessee, she said my aunt intended to change her will in December, and her aunt's leaving everything to charity, and she wanted to leave some stuff to family members. She wanted to help her family. She thought about it. Her husband had been dead enough years that she felt it was appropriate that she wanted to after she lost her husband, she became closer to her family. They had no children, and they lived with each other and for each other. And their family was there, but not part of their daily life, and was comfortable. And now all of a sudden, after her husband died, she started communicating with her own family, even though they were not local. She would call them. They would call her. They were checking in on her. And it had nothing to do with trying to get an inheritance. They now knew they were more necessary in her life. She was alone. And she wanted to change her estate plan, and that will never be changed. We have somebody else who said, a dear friend of hers contacted his lawyer, and the lawyer went to see the person. The person decided he wanted to leave this friend $100,000. The lawyer went to see the person and said, I can't do it. He's no longer competent.
Mm-hmm.
She said he's been saying it for months.
Yeah.
And the answer is, I understand, but what he intended and what he did are two different things. So if you want to do things with your estate plan, if you've been procrastinating because it's distasteful, you may not have your goals and objectives met. You may have the wrong person handling your affairs. You may have the wrong person making your medical decisions for you. It's really important. And this was just a reminder to me, this storm. And we're getting a lot of calls now from people who want to come in because they've dealt with some of those realities.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just want everyone to know who you are. I always let you just start talking, but it's important that people do know that. So I am talking to Joseph Karp, who is an elder law attorney. His headquarters is up in his headquarters area. Let's just say it's Palm Beach Gardens, but he has offices in Boynton Beach and in, I guess it's
Port St. Lucie.
Port St. Lucie, right. And he really has been probably our longest advertiser and one of my dearest friends. We have recommended him to so many people, and we have used Joe Karp because he is very special in many ways. So let me just give you a phone number for you to call his office if you so desire to do that. Remember, this is Pencil Talk Radio. It's 800-893-9911. Or if you go to his website, it is very, very comprehensive, very complete with everything. And it is karplaw.com. That's KARPLAW.com. Okay, Joe. And, of course, you mentioned your seminars, and you can get on the website and then see the seminars, too. And so we certainly do appreciate that you care so much for your clients. But more than that, what I like about you is you always look ahead. Not what they tell you, but then you say, okay, what if this works? And then what if, like 7 steps ahead with everybody. I've noticed that about you.
You have to, because if you're planning, you can anticipate good and bad. And you can anticipate birth and death. You can anticipate incapacity. And by the way, for the listeners, if you come to our workshops, we offer a free consultation to anyone that we believe we can help, so that if you show up, you'll be given a free consultation. Now, if you don't want to show up, we'll gladly take a check instead of a free consultation, but we find it's more beneficial for everybody. We can charge you for consultations, but we find it's much better for people if they go to the workshop, they understand what we're talking about, they see Jenny, they see me, they see the other attorneys. We have 7 attorneys altogether in this firm just handling elder law, estate planning, and estate administration. And both Jenny and I are board certified as elder law specialists, and that adds to the experiential basis.
The other thing is you really like what you do. You like the people. You've been doing it for a long time, and now you even have brought your son into the business.
Yes. And I do like the people. The people who were in yesterday, the people from Tennessee, the woman who said it was about her aunt, she brought her father with her, who is the brother of the decedent. And I'm not all business. I want to know who I'm dealing with. I want to relate to him. And I said, well, what did you do for a living? And he said, I was a meat cutter. And I said, well, since we're down here, was it Winn-Dixie or Publix? He said, no, it was the A&P. And I said, oh, the Great Atlantic and Pacific supermarket. That was the first supermarket I ever went to. And he just smiled, and I joked with him about what he did. He was a meat cutter, so what do you ask a meat cutter?
Oh, you ask him a lot of things about kinds of meat that
I asked him if he still had all 10 fingers, because I've never met a meat cutter who did. And sure enough, he had 9 7/8.
Really?
He had lost. It's a hazard of that job. Me, I get paper cuts. I'm a paper pusher. Meat cutters cut off tips of their fingers on a regular basis. And can I tell you, he was thrilled that I knew that was an occupational hazard of his. He was thrilled to show me. He said, I didn't do badly. He pointed up his index finger, and it was missing, like, where the nail was up. And that was, he said, I didn't do badly. But I get to relate to people, and I hear their stories. And if he had all 10 fingers, I would have shook his hand and said, wow, this is the first time I've shook the hand of a meat cutter with 10 fingers. So but we learn who the people are. We relate to them better. We understand what they understand. They don't do this for a living. They don't deal with estate planning. They don't deal with what happens when somebody dies. They don't understand our terms. So we try to bring it into their comprehension level, and that's not to demean their intelligence. That's to try to relate to people and understand who they are and where they're coming from. Because if you're talking to an accountant, the accountant's going to have a different understanding of what goes on. So they have one level. If you're talking about a businessman, you can explain certain things. And everybody understands things differently, and how you tell the story and how you explain why things have to happen. And when you're and being totally candid with the people, let them know what's going on.
Yeah, that's
and
beautiful.
Find out where they're coming from.
That's right. Well, that's called really, in sales, that we all know that's what you have to do. That's really the way it is. It's not the business, because that comes once people trust you. It's really finding out who they are, and then you can ask them a lot of things. You brought up a good point. I want to tell you a story that I once had a very, very expert financial planner who advertised, and he wasn't getting repeat people at his seminars. And so I said to him, let me go and see. Well, you know what he didn't do? These people sat, something that I think you always interact with the people at your seminars, but what he did is he just went on and started talking. He didn't know who those people were sitting in the seminar, and he only had 10 people. So it wasn't like you where you have, 30, 40. He had a small group of people. If he found out who they were, it would have been more important. But he didn't. He just talked.
Yeah, you can't, because you have to relate to your audience. You have to understand, and they have to understand that you're talking to them. They have to understand you're not talking at them, you're talking to them, you're talking with them. And when you go to our workshops, you'll never hear us mention a code number, a tax number. We don't talk about the Internal Revenue Code section, this and that. We tell people stories. We explain what the law is. We try to explain some of the confusion, and we also try to take some of the confusion and myths. As you mentioned, my column in Boomer Times, we did 3 columns in Boomer Times about Alzheimer's disease and the Medicaid myths that exist. So I would urge your listening audience to pick up a Boomer Times, read it. I think it's also available online so that people can understand what things do and what the mistakes are, what people don't understand.
Oh, yes, your columns are great, absolutely great.
So we try to give people an understanding of what's going on, give them some clarity so that they understand what 5-year look-backs really mean, what penalty periods exist, what kind of trusts do what. So many people come into us and they say, "Oh, I'm protected for Medicaid. I did a revocable trust." And we'll say, that doesn't protect you for Medicaid.
Right.
At all. I mean, it's a good thing to have, but not for Medicaid. That's your money. Pay your bills.
Right. Joe, one thing that I was curious about, when doctors go to parties, the first thing when someone's introduced and they're a doctor, usually the person meets a person and they'll say, "Oh, I have this problem." And they try to get them to tell them things. Do they do that when they hear that you're an elder law attorney?
Sometimes, and because I have such a broad-based background, as you well know, because before I did elder law, I did criminal, matrimonial, and litigation. So I have a real broad-based background. So I get asked lawyer questions all the time, and I'll give answers. I'll tell people what I do know and don't know. And most people don't understand some very fundamental things. I'm dealing with a family right now. The wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So what did the husband do? He had a friend go online, have her do a power of attorney, and they had it witnessed and notarized. Number one, it ain't worth a damn. Number two, I have the husband in with his son, and I say, well, did you do a power of attorney for yourself, giving your son the authority to handle financial affairs for you? He said, why should I? I still can. I said, because your wife signed something that isn't worth a damn, because no lawyer of any competence would have allowed her to sign based upon what you told me was her condition when she signed. You got to do the preparation. You got to do things in advance. So
and Joe, I hate to cut you off, but they're giving me the sign. We want everyone to hear you, so thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again.
Okay, see you next month.
All right,
Take
bye,
care.
Joe.
Go visit Jenny at the workshops. Bye-bye.